Hello, BookTube. Welcome back to my channel. It is February Fantasy Stories, an event created by the Bookish Bryants and a whole host of co-hosts. I myself am one among them, and I am probably the worst of them because I think I might be the last one to do any kind of an update video. And yeah, the amount of stuff I've been reading hasn't been phenomenal. The idea here is to read shorter fantasy fiction, much like when they did New Worlds November. And so the idea is to read things that are 250 pages or shorter. Ideally short stories, but short novels too can fit the bill. And they had weekly prompts. So week one, we had classic fantasy. So anything written before 1971. And so for that, the one that qualified for it, I picked from my ace double here, the Prism, because you look at that cover and you think that's going to be like sword and sorcery kind of fantasy, and it was written in the 60s. I should have read the little tagline here. Was he a hero of heroes or a puppet of the Star Watchers? And that would have clued me in that it is about 30% fantasy and about 70% science fiction, which there's nothing wrong with that. But it was far less fantasy than I had expected. But still really good. I absolutely enjoyed it. In fact, it made me want to soon read Crown of Infinity on the other side, which I had planned on and failed to read in New Worlds November. But it also has me wanting to check out more of these ace doubles. I like this concept where you've got two books in the one, both relatively short books. So when I get off this book challenge, which I'm going to continue, those of you that caught my announcement earlier tonight, just because I'm putting a halt on joining read-alongs, hosting clubs, doing TBRs, all of that stuff, just because I'm throwing all of that out the window, I'm still not buying books. I'm 27 books into my 100 book challenge, and I'm going to continue going strong. I hope. Now that the last of my holiday spending is behind me, it is moving forward. I've got so many books that I can read. There's no shortage of them. So while I might have a wish list a mile long, I've got a to-be-read list on my shelves a mile long as well. But the Prism, I did enjoy it, by Emil Pitaja. And so for that, each week I'm going to read a story of this little fantasy medley. And so for that one, I looked at it, and I looked at what the stories were in here. And I looked at the first one. It says, Zen and the Art of Vampirism. I figured, okay, that kind of fits week 3 for grimdark, dark fantasy. And then I looked at the third one in there, From Russia with Love. I said, okay, that probably fits with urban fantasy week 4. And so that left the other two to read one a week anyway, even if they didn't really fit. I didn't really have a book that would fit with weeks 3 and 4, so it was nice to have a short story to fit with them. So week 1, I read Words Like Rain, or Words Like Coins by Robin Hobb. It was so delightful. My goodness. Robin Hobb can write, and there's good reason why she is on my Mount Rushmore for fantasy authors. It blew me away. It was a very, very enjoyable short story. I couldn't put it down when I started reading it. I actually was about 40 pages from the end of this, decided to, I'll grab this, I'll look at this. I had to finish that story before I could get back and finishing this. It was that good. So that was what I did for week 1 for fantasy February stories. Week 2 is Sword and Sorcery. So I picked up Three-Bladed Doom, Robert E. Howard. Of course, it says up here Conan, but this is not a Conan story, as Michael K. Vaughan probably could have told you long before I picked it up. This is an El Borak story. And it was an interesting story. I just finished it yesterday. So cut it to the edge of that week-long thing. And it was enjoyable. I think the character of El Borak in this story has probably been my least enjoyed Robert E. Howard thing so far. And I still enjoyed it quite a bit. So Robert E. Howard is also on that little Mount Rushmore. And so the short story that I read out of here, the fantasy medley, is Writing the Shore of the River of Death by Kate Elliott. And I had never read anything by Kate Elliott. And so I was eager to do so. And it was fine. It was okay. Probably the bottom of the 4 things I've read so far. It was still enjoyable. I still enjoyed the story, but it was fine. It did make me wish, over the course of reading the 2 stories out of here so far, that I had some kind of a fantasy anthology that's bigger than this, that has more than the 4 stories, because I'd love to read more fantasy short stories. But I don't have any, other than anthologies where I've got works published, which I might end up picking one of them up. We'll see what I've got time for this month. I don't think I'll have time to get ambitious and do anything beyond what I've already got planned. So what am I planning for week 3? Week 3 is dark fantasy, and I've got the vampire story in there, which is, I think, the shortest of the stories in there. And so I'm looking forward to that. That is by Kelly Armstrong, and I haven't read anything by Kelly Armstrong, so I'm excited to dive into that. And then I've got a less than 100-page novella, No One Knows the Cat by Anne McCaffrey. I've read some Anne McCaffrey in the past. I've never read this one. And so I'm excited to read it. We'll see how it goes. I'm hoping to report back good things on it. I know it's not going to be dark fantasy. I'm okay with that because you don't have to follow the prompts. You just have to read fantasy. And as long as you've read one, you've satisfied the prompt for February fantasy stories. But I do have an announcement. So this is different than the announcement of I'm tossing everything to the side. So in addition to being somebody that likes to read books, I have written and published some stuff. And so starting tomorrow, Wednesday, running for 1 week only, the ebook version of Monster Huntress, I am knocking it down from $4.99 to 99 cents. So you can pick it up for practically dirt cheap. And I welcome you to, once you've read it, if you choose to pick it up, to read it, to let me hear your thoughts, even if you don't want to make a review. I'm far enough removed from having written it that I'm not going to be offended by anything you have to say, any criticisms you have. It's towing the line between being upper limits of middle grade and the lower limits of young adult. But I think that it avoids any of the bad tropes that caused me to roll my eyes in young adult. And Ava is one of my favorite characters. In fact, she started as an adult in some short stories that are in A Merchant in Nori and other tales. And then I went back and decided to start writing her origin story to find out where she started. And that is where Monster Huntress came from. But in addition to that, I've also I'm in the process of resurrecting my old blog website. And so what I did is I picked one of my fantasy stories because it is Fantasy February and put it up on there for free for you to read. And so the reason why I had the slip of the tongue, so I read the short story Words Like Coins by Robin Hobb for the first time just this month. And a couple of years ago, I wrote a short story called Words Like Rain. And it is one of my a very imaginative story, I would like to think, and I still enjoy it. And so I have it up, and I'll have that link down below to where you can go read that for free. So if you have not picked up A Merchant in Orient and Other Tales, where it is also found, you can go and read one of the stories without paying anything to get a sample of the writing and see if it interests you enough to want to read any of the other stories that are in there. So I'll welcome you to do that. So thank you for watching. I hope you have a great rest of your evening or day if you're watching this on the next day. And I will be back for Poetry Thursday because I'm about to record that now while I have a little bit of time and energy to do so. I'm not going to miss 3 weeks in a row on Poetry Thursday. So have a great day, BookTube.